What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Truck Parking Clubhouse. I'm your host, Michael Lombard, back at it again on another Monday night. Appreciate you guys tuning in wherever you're at. Hey, if you're tuning into the Truck Parking Clubhouse live, feel free to drop a comment in the chat where you guys are tuning in from. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. We're rolling straight into it's the spooky season, man. We got Halloween this week. So whether you're at home, over the road, if you're hauling candy, drop it in the chat, drop it in the comments. If you got some candy corn on you, let us know where we can get some. If you didn't check just before we get rolling into today's clubhouse, and we're going to go into it, but Taillights issue 41 has just dropped in your inbox 35 minutes ago. 35 minutes ago, where we cover a little bit of double brokering, talk a little bit about there was a recent very tragic accident in the state of California recently. Kind of go into the inner workings with that. It's related to a lot of what we've been covering in Taillights past few weeks and months, as well as some weekly discount codes and their partner codes for you guys to find parking wherever you are out there over the road. So check your inbox. Might need to check your spam. Like I said, sometimes newsletters might drop. Sometimes the good stuff is where you'd least expect it. So check that spam folder, see if you can find it. If you're not subscribed to the Taillights newsletter, feel free to download the Truck Parking Club app or go to newsletter.truckparkingclub.com. But without any further delay, let's get into today's discussion with our boy, Mr. Wolfgang Wedlin. What's up, brother?
Not a lot, man. How you doing?
Good, man. And also just a big happy birthday to you out there, man. Coming at you. It's his birthday today, and he's jumping on to talk trucking.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, and it's nice. I'm glad you're at home right now, right?
I am. Yeah. I'm at home.
Those are moments you definitely cherish. I think every birthday I was over the road, I was definitely physically over the road, and then I was in the military. I spent a lot of birthdays not where my domicile would be, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's like it's truly special to be home and around it, even though it's just some people will say it's just another day. It's I think we should people should take birthdays more seriously. It's important. It's just they are a celebration, of what our friends and individuals do over the course of a year. So, man, happy birthday.
Absolutely, dude. Thank you, man.
Before we get rolling, let's give a brief recap to anybody who doesn't know who you are. What's a little bit of the Wolfgang story? Where are you from? What got you into trucking?
Yeah, so I'm from East Tennessee originally, and trucking was, a little different for me. I was never grandfathered into it. I didn't really stumble into it like some folks looking to make a quick buck. It was, strangely enough, just a dream job for me. I was always infatuated with trucking. And then I got into it, and I quickly realized, people think it takes decades to realize, some sort of a semblance of what's going on in the industry, but there are certain gaping holes in the industry that, you can pick up on within like a week on the road. Right. And that was me. And then I kind of sat back and compartmentalized a lot of this stuff. And it was a bit demoralizing because, the truck parking crisis for one of them, some of the issues with I'll just say foreign labor in the industry. And eventually I decided to take to TikTok and just, post some of my thoughts, because I very much so view silence as complacency, right? I mean, if we see massive issues, I might not be able to change laws, but I can at least talk about these issues and try to do my part in some way. And that's kind of what gained me a following on TikTok, which I'm still growing, talking about these issues. And linked up with Truck Parking Club, obviously a huge fan of you guys and what y'all do. And that's kind of what led up to where I'm at today.
Oh, man, that's awesome. When it comes to the content stuff, it's really important. I even mentioned it on last week's Clubhouse. It's it'd be, if Truck Parking Club were to exist and all we was this parking solutions app where if you're in a bind, you can find a spot like kind of on a go, and that was really it. Like we kind of just draw the lines out like, hey, if you need help with parking, we got 24-hour customer service, feel free to download our app, check our locations. And I think if the period was at the end of that sentence, it kind of, you're right, there's always more. And that's what, like, our co-founder and CEO, he was just recently recently in DC, advocating for more free parking for drivers. Very, very public on that. It's all over LinkedIn. So we're involved with so many different organizations who also to help, and there's dollars that go behind that for these efforts to lobby to the people who need to hear about what the industry needs. And then on top of that, the content stuff too, like, the Truck Parking Club accounts, we've had these accounts that we've been that people have followed due to the service that we provide, and we'd kind of be remiss to not kind of join in on that conversation as being a resource, being another resource for drivers, and
Hmm.
also being a conduit. And that's why the newsletter comes out on Mondays to talk about, because we've got other newsletters too, with Truck Parking Club, and individuals and drivers may get them, but they may not be that relevant to the
Yeah.
industry, kind of like news and like what's going on and everything. And having drivers on and talking about their careers, the companies they work for, what are good companies, like all that stuff is really important in the trucking industry for guys to know about. Hey, where should I be driving? What are places to stay away from? Who are some good companies? Who are some people maybe to stay away from? And it's like, for it to to simply just clock in and clock out. I'm not saying everybody needs to put their face on a camera screen or anything, but there's so much we can do when it comes to I mean, even in the days of like the First World War, I mean, the lowest private was writing letters, and there was prose that was going out to back home to individuals, to loved ones, to family, to let them know just what they were going out, just their thoughts. Like they would
Hmm.
write these letters, and so it's awesome that you've kind of made content and jumped in the fray on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, I think there's a lot of other positives to this as well. Aside from just talking about issues, like you said, talking about what are good companies, maybe giving some tips to new drivers, because we need to be flooding the industry. And I don't use that in the term of the truck driver shortage. I mean, we need to be flooding the industry with people who actually want to do this job, people who are competent, people who care about this job, and people who are not going to turn our roadways into a safety hazard. And when I think a lot of people like that get into the industry, and I think they could do very well in the industry, but I think they're given a lot of false expectations by some of these recruiters that are akin to used car salesmen. And I think they need to hear from people like myself, actual drivers who maybe have went through all the trials and tribulations to get to a certain point. Like, hey, if you just grind it out, you can get there. And I see a lot of guys just quit. They throw in the towel, they're done, they let their CDL go, who I think could be really good drivers. So I think that's the other portion of just coming on social media. You may not want to talk about issues in the industry, that's fine. But if you're a truck driver with experience, we see time and time again a lot of OGs, a lot of old heads. I can name like 10 of them right now that are way older than I am, been in the industry way longer than I have. And they're just a wealth of knowledge, and they're sharing it with people on TikTok. And that alone is a huge asset too.
For sure. I mean, I think I've gotten either one or two guys, and this is since I, stopped driving. I've directed one or two owner operators, single truck owners, to Warren Transport, because I believe that they're a good outfit, similar
Mhm.
to Landstar or Mercer in a lot of ways. I think it's a great place to learn, to make some mistakes, especially if you're like a first time business owner. And so I've brought guys to that with no, like, there's no money in it for me. Like I don't
Yeah.
get anything for that, but because I know the outfit and the organization, and I mean, I know I had a full relationship with the VP of the specialized division. He was a great guy. So it's like, I'm going to refer people. So if guys own a truck and they're hurting in this economy, hey, go try this out. At least just have the conversation with them if they don't think the option exists. And that same way I drove for a really great, respectable company out of Northwest Arkansas, I'm going to feed guys who are passionate about the industry to R&R Solutions. And if anybody's wondering, right out of Gravette, Arkansas, R&R Solutions, phenomenal outfit, small size carrier that's also like a 3PL that has a lot going on, that freaking loves their drivers. Like, that's good information. And to keep that in, to stay silent on that hurts the other guy. And it's not saying, like you said, it's not saying, you have to go out there and be on camera all the time, but at least that's why Twitter's so great. You don't need to put your face behind it. You don't need to always be on camera and have a script or anything. You can kind of just, let it riff, just type it out. Hey, I drove for this company. They were good. Like, there doesn't need to be any hooks or art to it. You could just kind of send it. You could just follow people and then reply to them, as opposed to being a creator, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I think we should have sort of like a Rolodex of companies that are actually worth driving for. I mean, we all know the ones that are not worth driving for. But unfortunately, the guys coming into the industry, they may not know. One thing I will say real quick, I think this is very pertinent. A lot of guys, when they first come into the industry, right, they fall for this scam. But most guys have to cut their teeth in a mega carrier, and um, I've seen it time and time again where mega carrier A will treat a driver like a dog. And then mega carrier B will come in and they'll recruit that driver and say, look, we're going to treat you better. And then mega carrier C, D, E. And then by the time the guy's got a year of experience, he's got the experience, may have a clean record, but he's got like 5 or 6 jobs because all these companies are really not the greatest to work for. And I always tell people just grind it out at one company. And while you're there, keep your nose clean and try to tap into people like you who are giving information about good, valuable companies that actually care about their drivers. And then, you can kind of start working your way up the totem pole. And that's like one of the best key pieces of advice I try to give people. Just grind it out for that first year, put up with it. You're going to be a truck number to these people. It is what it is. Probably not going to make the best money, but if you can get at least past that 1 year hump, your potential is greatly increased, especially if you have good job history. I never really realized how important job history was to a lot of employers, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, which actually, and I got a question for you because it's funny enough. A gentleman that I was in the Marine Corps with, he just shot me a message. He's kind of been he's kind of turned off by his current career, and he was talking to me about the trucking industry, and he was actually asking me. He was saying what would be the best, and he's a veteran, so I gave him kind of options. He was asking me like what do I think was the best way to enter the industry. He said should I pay my own way through school, or I've heard companies, and I told him, I said, hey, I think paying for school yourself is one. I was like, number two, states also offer, there's some states have grants you can also
Mhm.
look into. If you have any GI Bill left, use that. But I gave him the recommendation of, I think overall, like if there's no other benefits, to take out a student loan for anywhere from 4 to 7 grand, however much it's going to be, is better off. If you were if somebody were to approach you, say they're an individual who wants to join the trucking industry, what would kind of be your advice to them?
So I would ask, like, what is your main approach? Is money a big deal? Do you want to pay your way through? But I'm gonna tell you what I did, and I honestly think this is a really good approach to take. There was a truck driving school in Knoxville, Tennessee Truck Driving School. They're still there. They've got a new location now. And essentially, the way it worked for them, I actually went through when I was 20. I hadn't turned 21 yet. But they basically have a handful of companies they work with, like Stevens Transport, Land Air Transport, which is who I went to work for. But what they do is if you basically fill out like a pre-application with one of the companies that they source you with, or they outsource with, and if that carrier says that you're eligible to be hired, which obviously you will be, contingent upon getting your CDL if you have a relatively clean record, no DUIs, all that stuff, then the school will allow you to show up to the school essentially for free, no money out of pocket. The carrier that you go to work for assumes the responsibility of what you could consider the student loan debt. And as long as you work for them for, I think it was like 6 months to a year, then you don't owe anything out of pocket. It's totally free to go through, other than like, paying to get there if you're from out of state. But they even have housing they can put you in. And there's a lot of programs like that, aside from just that one location, that'll do that. And then that kind of segues in, if you go work for one of these companies, that to me, there's no money out of pocket and it's guaranteeing you a job to start getting experience. Like, it's great to be able to pay out of pocket, but if you don't, I mean, knocking on doors with a fresh CDL in your hand with no experience is kind of tricky, right? But like for me, for an example, I went to Land Air Transport. Now they've merged with Covenant Transport since, but they're still sort of their own company and they're a smaller company. I was making 60 cents a mile with like 3 months of experience, bringing home like $1,500 a week, home on the weekends. I got a really good deal right out of the gate with a company like that. And I will say, some of these larger companies, some of these mega carriers, the bread and butter of what they do is like dedicated freight, and they typically will pay more on those dedicated accounts because they're getting, it's direct shipper contracts, right? So there's no broker involved. They're getting more money. So that's what I would recommend. And one thing I will say too, I think this is very, very important. Diversifying your portfolio as a driver. Learn reefer, obviously drive in, maybe flatbed and platform if you can. And most of the time, I mean, look at all these mega carriers now. You can do all of those things with one mega carrier. You don't have to go from this company to learn reefer, drive in, and flatbed. I mean, every mega carrier almost now has, they even have tanker, they have some ag stuff. They're doing it all. So if you want to just pick one good, and some of these mega carriers also have their own training programs as well. That's another keynote. Like I think Prime does, a lot of these companies do. So if you wanted to lock in with one of those companies, you could literally go to the company, fill an app out, and basically pay nothing out of pocket. You just work for them, and you can learn tanker, flatbed, drive-in, reefer at one company. So you're not job hopping. Figure out what you want to do. And then once you get some experience, if you want to leave and make more money, then you can kind of have an idea of where you want to go, what you want to do, what you like, what you don't like, and then go from there. That would be like the best piece of advice I think I could give.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's well said. Want to give a quick shout out to Jennifer. Appreciate your comment out there on Facebook, who also agrees you should pay up front in some sort of way to do it. Yeah, I think and just like and I guess if I was to, and I plan on having a conversation with my Fred, a good thing is also doing the research on where you live.
Hmm.
I think like because where you live also matters, because whatever your lineup, like if you're going to be over the road, if you're over the road and you live in a place like Arizona, getting back home is tough, depending on the company you drive for.
Yeah.
Like if you're the Western 11 is is a very difficult place. It's beautiful. You know, it's probably the most beautiful parts of the country is in the Western 11, but 2/3 of the population kind of lives east of I-35. You know, there's a reason why UPS has such a main hub in Louisville, Kentucky, because it's 8 hours any direction to 2/3 of the United States. And so being in the Western 11, like getting home, I mean, we think about how wide open it is. There's just no population density. So there's not as much
Yeah.
freight going as many places as where people may live. So they'll be like, well, I live in Phoenix. It's a big city. And it's like, you got Phoenix, you got Tucson, and that's it. Like those,
Yeah.
like those are the extent of like how, like, you've got the greater Phoenix area, you've got Tucson, and then the rest of Arizona is, it is what you get. It's desert, it's Flagstaff, and Flagstaff isn't that big. So it's like, yeah, it's like it's one major city, but there's only so much freight going to and from, and there's millions of
Yeah.
trucks on the road. So it's like, it's a great thought to get into, almost like, and I say that too with people who want to become, it's the same thing if you want to own your own truck. Like if you want to be an owner operator, where you live is going to matter. You know, if you wanted to open up a surfboard shop in Morton, Illinois, you're probably going to have a hard time selling surfboards. So it's like if you want to be an owner operator out of Florida, it's, again, Florida's a tough place. It's peninsula. You know, what kind of freight are you going to be moving? What kind of who are your customers going to be? And that kind of needs to be the thought process going into it. Same thing if you're just entering the industry. If you're in New York, New Jersey area, things are different than if you live in Central Texas, or
Yeah.
if you live wherever. So it's like location matters. What line of work you want to get into matters. All good stuff, all good info. But yes, appreciate you, Jennifer, for your kind comment on the Facebook live stream. Thanks for tuning into the Clubhouse. Kind of going into that, you mentioned dedicated lanes
Hmm.
with the major fleets. That's what they do, and those dedicated lanes do pay better because the mileage is sometimes lower. But you mentioned there not being any brokers involved with that, which gets right into the newsletter. Recently, Shaquille O'Neal, so double brokering is a huge problem in the industry. It's definitely, freight fraud has definitely been a huge highlight. I'd say, I mean, it's talked about a lot on TikTok amongst drivers and owner operators. I'd say the LinkedIn crowd definitely talks about freight fraud a lot. I mean, Freight Waves had their own symposium talking about freight fraud. I'm curious. You were mentioned before we jumped on here. You had dodged a bullet when it comes to double brokering. What have you encountered out there in the double brokering schemes?
Yeah, so thankfully I've had the foreknowledge of what goes on, and you can kind of tell right when you pick up the phone. And thankfully right now we have, from a broker's perspective and even from carriers' perspectives, we have a lot of tools at our disposal to be able to tell. Now from the carrier's perspective, we're the ones who, if a double brokering situation comes into play, that the real problem is, I mean, you have broker A, and broker A enters into an agreement with the shipper, right? And the shipper is their customer, but broker A doesn't necessarily have a truck for that load, so they will double broker that load out to, let's say, broker B. Well, the carrier gets screwed because the carrier is booking the actual load with broker B, but broker B doesn't have the contract with the customer. So now the customer's freight is with a broker they're not doing business with. The carrier's got the freight on their trailer for a broker who doesn't have any business handling the cargo. Broker A is shaving off money from the load, and now broker B is also shaving off money from the load, so it's less money for the carrier, and it's just a mess in general. And I will say that the times that I've dealt with it, I've just simply called them out right out from the gate, like, hey, this seems like a double brokering scenario. And um, I don't mean to sound crass or abrasive here. I just want to be accurate and honest. And there is absolutely a correlation. Let me just put it this way: the same types of people who are calling your grandmother and telling her to go to Walgreens and get $500 gift cards and send them to them. These are the same people typically who, when you answer the phone, are trying to get you to take a double brokered load, or are the ones double brokering loads. So you can tell based off of things like that right out of the gate. And if you call these people out on it, they'll usually just hang up. But double brokering also goes hand in hand with cargo theft. It is obviously illegal to double broker, and so thankfully, like I said, I've never been burnt necessarily. I never let it get to that point, but I have had time and time again where I have called on loads. And I've had brokers reach out that were just blatantly double brokered. I mean, it was, I would say it was like like 25% of every load that I would touch base on a daily basis would be a load that I suspected to be double brokered. So this is a deeply, deeply rooted issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's I technically hauled a load that was double brokered when I was a company driver. Like I went to a place in it was in Arizona actually.
Hmm.
I think it was Miami, Arizona, and maybe it's Miami. I don't know. Somebody can correct me in the comments. Which, by the way, if you're tuning in live, feel free to give a shout out, say what's up, say where you're tuning in from. But yeah, I went to the gate. I go to the person at the gate. I gave, they were like, I filled out the paperwork, which was, carrier name, and I put the carrier name, the pickup number, and I gave it back. And they told me that the pickup number I had was right, but the carrier was wrong.
Hmm.
And so I called I called my dispatcher and I was like, they're telling me I can't grab the load because the carrier's wrong. And he was basically like, like almost like it was like, this happens all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like, oh yeah, this happens. And like, he tried to explain it to me. And and he basically explained what double brokering is. He's like, go back there. He's like, tell them you're with US Express. And now there's a major carrier, US Express, that we know of, USXPRESS,
hmm,
which is like that's the huge fleet that we kind of see their trucks all the time. Like US Express is a major carrier, but the Express was spelt different. He's like, you have to spell it USEXPRESS, and it was like US Express LLC or something. And I was like, okay, and it worked. I then picked up the load, but then come to find out, after I delivered it, I started like doing research on it, and like if something were to happen, like if there was an accident or anything like that, like falls back on the
yeah.
me and the carrier I'm driving for,
Hmm.
uh, so to speak. So it's pretty wild how that happened. And in the case of Shaquille O'Neal, I mean, it's $180,000 Range Rover. What's insane about it is this is a huge problem, is the company that customized it. The company was called Effortless Motors. So it was the company who customized it. So this is a company that probably doesn't do a lot of freight movement. They found First Line Trucking LLC, which is a one truck, one driver fleet. I looked up their safer score, out of a residential address in Westlaco, Texas.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like, is that a red flag?
Well, you know what? It is hard to tell. I'll be totally honest with you, because if you look at pretty much any of these, I'm going to call it what it is. I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but again, I want to be accurate and honest here. Um, Typically, double brokering cargo theft goes hand in hand with the non-domicile operated companies, and the non-domicile operated companies are unanimous with being addressed out of abandoned apartment complexes, residential areas. I mean, you know the deal, Michael. So surprising, no, but it's if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And that's why it's hard now, though, because these people have infiltrated the industry so deeply. But if at all possible, I think it's best to stay away just in general from companies like that. And the problem is, like you said, the carriers are the ones who assume a lot of liability for this. Um, And brokers, I will say, brokers have a lot of tools at their disposal where when these guys are calling in, they can tell within seconds, is this number linked to other different MC numbers, various different tools they have. Carriers don't so much have those tools. There are tools they can use, but the brokers definitely have an advantage there. So carriers are the ones who typically are getting burnt by this because they just need to make money. They need the load. They need to get the driver moving, and they book loads in good faith. And let's be honest, you can't just say, well, this person doesn't speak good English, therefore I'm going to assume they're double brokering, because it's not always true. But like I said, it's there's definitely a common denominator there. So it's just creating an environment where everybody has to stay hyper vigilant. That's really, that's all I can say about that.
Yeah, I do want to give a brief shout out to there's a company out there called Genlogs, and their CEO Ryan Joyce. He made speaking of tools that brokerages and people in the industry can use. Genlogs is they're a technology and data provider for the industry, which leverages the sensors, computers, and a lot of the stuff that gives visibility and cameras. So like a lot of the cameras that are out there near scale houses, so it gives visibility into carriers, the lanes they're on, the trucks they have, the assets they have. And so it's the best way to describe Genlogs is it's a visibility tool. And the CEO even put on LinkedIn. So based off of Genlogs data, and this is straight from Ryan Joyce, this isn't made up. So the carrier, so Effortless Motors booked transport with a Texas-based carrier, First Line Trucking LLC. Their DOT is 2542369, and the pickup was in Georgia. So there's here's two red flags that Ryan says is that carrier has never been observed by Genlogs east of Texas within the last year, and hasn't been observed once throughout their entire data system in the past month. The carrier has, if you go to their Safer website, they have 100% vehicle out of service score, meaning every time it has been inspected, it has to be put out of service.
Yeah.
And so if Effortless Motors, or if the right people were using Genlogs, they could have seen that. They would have seen like, oh, this guy's never even been east of 35, and every time he's gotten an inspection, he's been put out of service. Maybe he shouldn't be hauling Shaq's $180,000 car. He wouldn't have said, oh, this is a double broker because it's a custom car making company, but they would have said, oh, this 100% out of service carrier probably shouldn't be moving Shaq's $180,000 Range Rover, a car that we customized for him.
Well, this is the other big issue here right now. And I think this kind of, it ties in very well with this. Like from a customer's perspective, from the shipper's perspective, I think that a lot of these companies and a lot of these folks, they have this, let me give an example here. I'm not saying that in any stretch that, truck drivers and trucking companies are akin to like airline pilots, but when you deal with an airline and airline pilots, you have a bit of comfort in knowing that these are professional operations. There's not going to be corners cut because the consequences would be severe. Nobody does that, right? Nobody expects to see a pilot drunk driving or pilots involved in fraud or, something like that. And I think a lot of the general motoring public that's not in the know in the industry, they very much so view the trucking industry with the same, with no exception, right? Like the railroad industry, same thing. Airline industry, same thing. By sea, same thing. So they view the trucking industry to be the same, right? There's no way there could be fraud and corruption and this thing called double brokering and these guys who are involved in cargo theft and stealing. Like, how does this happen, right? But the trucking industry is the one area where I think people need to really not let their guard down, but raise their guard, because it's not like other facets of the transportation industry, though it is heavily regulated. Obviously, we just have, it's like the Wild West out here with the double brokering. And like you said, I think we need to do more to educate the actual customers on some tools they can use as a customer, right? They trust the brokers. Like that's why they pay the premium to get a broker, is because they trust the broker to handle all of the logistics for them. But if they're working with a shady double brokering operation, then they've just sealed their fate, right? So as a customer, we need to educate customers a lot more, I think, and do more advocacy there. I don't know what that would look like, but just let people know who are looking to have their product move. Just because you're working with a broker, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good broker that's not going to steal your freight, double broker it out, or whatever it may be. And like you said, using platforms like your friend has, and just tools that we have at our disposal now that we didn't have 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's a step in the right direction.
No, absolutely. You mentioned earlier, how a lot of double brokering can be mixed up with, there's kind of like a overlap in the Venn diagram of, motor carriers that are actively hiring individuals with non-domiciled CDLs or CDLs that have been given kind of unlawfully out there. And you've been out there over the road, you've been out there kind of since a lot of this started really churning up at the beginning of summer. Ever since that, I think I called it. I forget when the last time I said it, but the wrong way U-turn crash in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I referred to that as the Franz Ferdinand of this of this year's like issue in freight, where like ever since that U-turn crash in Florida, it has been like that was the shot heard around the world. That was the powder keg where I think where it kind of spider webbed out to politicians from the DOT secretary down to congressmen, mainstream media outlets. Like we've had stuff, supply chain stuff hits the mainstream news, but like during COVID, it was all about the shortage and toilet paper and driver shortage, and that'll spin up, but then it spins back out. But ever since that Florida U-turn crash, there has been a constant wave of transportation. And even the CEO of FreightWaves, Craig Fuller, has said like he's never seen this many folks out of DC pay attention to CDLs ever in his career in the freight world. And I know you had mentioned that you've been out there over the road. We just recently had that accident in California we covered in the newsletter. Anything you've been seeing out there specifically, whether it be at scale houses or have you gotten any inspections recently? Have you seen? What have you kind of been seeing? What's your take?
Yeah. Now I'm not traveling as extensively coast to coast as I was. I'm more, I would say, regional now. I personally, to be honest with you, I've not seen much of a difference, right? I still walk into truck stops and I see people at the fuel desk who cannot even articulate the name of their company in English to the fuel desk employee to try to get a fuel receipt. I walk into shippers and receivers, I see this the exact same thing. But I do know we have seen news articles. For an example, Oklahoma recently did a blitz along I-40. I think they were targeting CDLs from California and New York because those are two places that we know are illegally issuing CDLs to people, to the extent of actually handing out CDLs with real ID stars on them to people with no name given. It literally says on the ID, no name given. So they were targeting those. I think 135 people were arrested. So there is some work being done. And I do know I've also saw some other videos. So it's a little more than anecdotal. There's definitely some video evidence, but I think there was a gentleman in Utah who was unable to renew his CDL because they were shut down currently trying to audit the issuance of their CDLs. Are they complying with federal regulations? So a lot of states are waking up to this, but a lot of states are also refusing to comply, California being the number one. We see a common trend here. The driver on the Florida Turnpike that you mentioned, where was his CDL issued from? California, Washington State and California. But California is the one that specifically operated outside the parameters of the law. And then we saw the crash recently in California that you brought up as well, where 3 people were killed. That was another individual who was given a CDL in California. Now, both of these guys shared one thing in common. They were asylum seekers, but they had not been granted asylum yet, as far as I know. I think the guy on the Florida Turnpike may have been, he was approved under the Biden administration. I think it was revoked under the Trump administration. But these are people who should not have been here to begin with, to be honest, if they were following, just basic immigration laws. And then on top of that, they were also not following federal, guidelines for CDL issuance. So personally, I honestly, I've not seen much of a difference. I really haven't. And to be honest with you, I want to clarify real quick here. As it pertains to over the road driving, I would honestly say from my experience, from what I see every day, these people make up at least 80% of the over the road drivers that I see every day, aside from the mega carriers. People say the numbers, when I say these people, I'm referring to the non-domicile, and specifically the ones who are not complying with the ELP requirement and stuff, the one, with fraudulent CDLs. But if we take into all drivers, we that's not really a good way to gauge that, because you have food delivery, you have all these, daily jobs, local jobs. These guys are not really in those careers in trucking, they're in the over the road sector. And as far as over the road goes, I would say they make up about 80%. So I think right now the lawmakers, I think they know this. And I think they're concerned. Like Sean Duffy, I think right now he's trying to do a lot of good, but his hands are tied. He knows that if he pulls the plug and he says, look, we're going to just basically take away the ability to obtain a CDL with an H-1B visa. That actually could cause a bit of a disrupt in the supply chain. I'm not a believer in the whole like driver shortage thing. It's a scam, it's propaganda, but these people are so deeply rooted in the industry right now that if they were to revoke all H-1B visas and then try to start over and maybe just have a better approach at how they issue those, it actually probably could put a strain on the supply chain because that's how deeply rooted these folks are in the industry.
Yeah, I'd say one of the toughest jobs to have right now. I mean, being the president seems incredibly difficult given, some global conflicts and other stuff that you always got to have relationships and conversations with. But man, like I think and I almost, part of me looks at Sean Duffy and I'm like, because I'll tell you what, his composure's really well. He's definitely has been polished for the job, but it's like when we really think about the job of the DOT secretary, at least for the past however many years, decades, who knows how, like this has probably been the most active and like most in the spotlight, I think a DOT secretary has been. And now, obviously there's talks of, DOT absorbing NASA. And so there's, so it's like, so there's more stuff kind of piled on. So it's like where there's some, I think reaction from the DOT secretary where he's clearly listening to the industry. He's listening to well-informed people in the industry. He's going to the right sources. This guy's got a lot on his plate to kind of figure out what the issue, because again, you're right. I think when you overhaul something, just like with diet and exercise, I talk about people coaching. When you start to overhaul things, it could lead to like some sort of disaster. When you try to overhaul things, you go too hard, too fast. You can, it can fail. Like it can help or hurt in a lot of ways when you completely overhaul things. I think an overhaul stuff needs to happen. It can't be, are we at the ripping the Band-Aid off point yet? I think people could argue, yeah. And I think that we're probably, if we're not there, we're definitely very close. But I still think that I'm a glass half full. I always think that there's diplomatic ways to kind of solve these issues. It's just a matter of, again, I feel like people need to have conversations in the same room. I think the governor of California should get on Twitter and start talking to the same drivers at I think if the governor of California, he was respectable enough to sit down with people like Sean Ryan, I think the governor of California should sit down and talk to some of our mutual friends on Twitter, and some of those individuals have human conversations with them, see that data, and have nobody play politics in it, because again, it's all rooted back into safety. But well said. Kind of shifting gears a little bit of a white pill, because another safety thing. So the American Transportation Research Institute came back out with their industry's top concerns of 2025, which is split between what carriers and drivers think. And truck parking actually for last 2 years was number 2. It's recently dropped to number 4 across the industry, but it's still number 2 for drivers. So there's clearly some sort of headway on the carrier side where parking doesn't seem that big of an issue. So clearly there's still work that needs to be done. But recently you popped by one of our locations recently. I wanted to hear about your latest experience at last property you're at.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I actually stayed in Bluntville, Tennessee. I was surprised you guys had locations there, but you guys are at like almost 3,200 locations now. So, but yeah, no, it's a huge luxury. That the corridor that I was staying on is like I-81 between like Knoxville and Bristol and East Tennessee right there. And it's really, there's a handful of truck stops. They all fill up really quick. And I just pulled up the app like I always do. If I need to book a spot, I pull up the app, I find a location, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to, I mean, obviously if you're in super rural areas out in the West or somewhere, I'm sure just parking in general, population in general is sparse out there. But every time that I've pulled up the app, I've been able to find a spot within a stone's throw. And, I think the spot was like $15. I pulled in, it was quiet. It was off the road, freshly paved, plenty of room to maneuver. I think people need to understand that like, these are not places that we're just like, hey, I think you can park your truck here. Go try. These people have said, if you can fit, you can. Like, these are places that have been scoped out. The instructions are blatantly clear on the app when you book. There's plenty of infrastructure there to support the trucks. And it's just, I can't even begin to emphasize the sigh of relief of when I get up in the morning. I know, okay, well, I'm going to be in this area kind of late. I know there's no truck stops. The ones that are existing are going to have, you know, absolute mayhem going on at this hour, and I just book a spot. And I know that if I do that in the morning, when I get to this place, I have zero concerns, zero stress. I just pull in, set the brakes, and usually I've got most of these places to myself. It's nice. And that luxury right there is well worth the 15, 20, 25 bucks a night, whatever it is. And I've been trying diligently to get more people, put onto the platform, whether it's sharing my promo code, sharing other people's promo codes, whatever it is, just try it out for yourself. And a lot of guys, they've said, well, I don't want to pay for parking every night. That's fine. You don't have to. But when you need to when you need to have a spot and you're not going to be able to have a spot otherwise, if you have the Truck Parking Club app, you've got a spot almost guaranteed. Like dude, I was even in New York City the other day and you guys had locations where I was at. It was insane.
I mean, that's one of the toughest parts of the country right there. And if you're anywhere in the tri-state, it's always dicey. The gentleman we had on last week, he's a New Jersey guy, kind of same thing. I look at, when it comes to the idea of paying for parking, like nobody loves it. Again, we're an organization that quite literally lobbies to the government and to state organizations for more free parking, like which I think and I've never that's almost like Google lobbying for Meta, Meta should get more tax breaks and more grants or so. Like you're kind of lobbying to your competition in a way. And so it's like, when it comes to the paying for parking, and there's plenty of people who say I've driven for 30 plus years, I never paid. And it's like, that's awesome. Like, but just like how we talked about when we started, like everybody's lane in this industry is very different. What people run, how they run, the lanes they run, their job, where they're going. It's different for everybody. Like, it was different for me. I probably paid for parking 3 to 5 times a month because that's just sometimes how it worked, depending on where I was, where I went, especially when I was like booking my own freight, when I was all in dry van as an owner operator. Like, I didn't always have the luxury of knowing what my lanes were, because most, like 80% of the freight I was moving was brokered loads. The other 20% was some contracted stuff. So it's like, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes I would be going to the Northeast, or I'd be in a area that I'm not that familiar with. And so it's just like, you know what, instead of torching gas out of my tank, like, okay, it's like, instead of torching $40 out of your tank driving around for an hour, there's $15 and you're kind of done for the night, so to speak. So it's like, it's really just a kind of a tool for the tool belt while we're out there. And no, it's good. I mean, right there in Blunsville, Tennessee, like right where you least expect it. So I'm stoked to hear it. Before we wrap this one up and we get ready to take on our week charging a Halloween, any final thoughts, any final words of wisdom you want to leave to the crowd?
Yeah, I'll say one last thing on the truck parking deal. I get the same thing. I get a lot of pushback, people saying I've not ever had to pay for parking before. I don't want to now. Well, we're not dealing with an industry that is fostering the same environment that it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So we have to be able to adapt and overcome if we want to be able to succeed. And the fact of the matter is, nobody will disagree, we have a truck parking problem, right? So one of two things is going to happen. We're gonna fix the problem, or we're just going to keep adding trucks and not adding parking, and that's eventually going to collapse. It was already collapsing with people piled up on ramps, and all that good stuff. So what are the options to fix this? Well, you have, number one, you can create some sort of private investment firm where you try to crowdsource hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, from people who are willing to donate and investors. And then you have to go get the zoning, and you have to get the permitting, and you have to get approvals from municipalities. That this would take decades if you could even find the money. That's option number one. That's really the only private option. Option number two is waiting on the government to come fix the problem. And that's, unfortunately, though you guys are lobbying for it and really doing God's work there, that also takes time. So option number three would have to be a fresh approach on this, and something that would reinvent the wheel, because neither of those are really feasible to address the issue quick enough. And that's why Truck Parking Club has came in And what you guys have done is you guys have obviously utilized already existing property, right? So there's no need for zoning approval. There's no need for investment to buy up land. You guys are utilizing already existent land, and it's mutually beneficial for Truck Parking Club because when we buy spots, it enables Truck Parking Club to grow the network, which you guys are absolutely doing. You can look at the location count on the screen if you question that. And then it also benefits the landowners. These are people who have open property they weren't previously getting paid to do anything with, and now they're making a residual income off of it, and it benefits the driver. So this, to me, is the actual solution to this problem. And like I said, Truck Parking Club has really reinvented the wheel on that. So I try to lay it out like that for people so they can understand. You may not like it, but this is the solution. And when I book a spot, I don't view it as me just wasting 15 or 20 bucks beyond the convenience of what I'm earning myself by booking the spot and the peace of mind. I'm also helping to keep the wheels, moving on this machine as you guys grow more and more. And I think a lot of people are hopping on board with this. I talked to a lot of people that previously weren't for it. Now they are for it. And I hope it can continue to grow for sure.
Dude, wise words right there. Again, time is a factor, and kind of touching on your final thoughts. I mean, basically, it took, just when people don't think about the time, I mentioned this a lot, but in Willington, Connecticut, which isn't far from Yukon, there's been a TA truck stop there for years. It took Love's, 4 or 5 years to build a location there, which is open there now. It's right off of I-84 right there,
Mhm.
in Connecticut. It took them years because the town of Willington, by the way, has a population of like very low, like maybe it's got 1,500 people. I'd have to look.
Yeah.
It's very small, like it's very empty. New England area up by Yukon stores going towards Worcester, Mass, and so there's not a lot there. And the town gave vehement pushback against it because of possible increase in crime, the increase in traffic, so it's like, and Love's has got a lot of money. Like Love's
Yeah.
they are growing probably as fast as they can. They're also trying to add a lot of parking. So it's not like Love's is like broke. Like so if they're trying to build in Connecticut, it took them 4 years. That's 4 years of paying money just to open up more truck parking. That's time. That's time that we don't have solved this issue. So well said on that, man. Dude, number one, thanks for coming back on the Clubhouse. Definitely won't be the last time, especially as we go towards the end of the year. Would love to just start rapid firing guys off with all the news and updates. Number two, happy birthday. Go out and celebrate it.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of it. And for those of you guys, I want to appreciate everybody who tuned in live. If you are just tuning in now, appreciate you jumping on in. Feel free to go back and listen. But if you couldn't tell, been listening for the past 48 or so minutes, Wolfgang is an individual who wants to leave the trucking industry better than they found it. And that's why he's partnered with us to help drivers out with safe parking that they can instantly reserve at any time. And that's exactly what we're doing at Truck Parking Club. At Truck Parking Club, we help truckers save time, fuel, thus money, by being able to instantly reserve truck parking all across the United States. We're just over 31. We're at 3,148 properties. So if you need truck parking tonight, again, right at the bottom of the screen, $20 off. You can use that promo code Wolfgang20. Subscribe to the Taillights newsletter. But with that, guys, we'll be back next Monday night, 7:30. Stay safe. Happy Halloween. Hammer down.